Hi, my name is Adam Driscoll, and today we're going to be talking about how to automate your desktop with PowerShell Universal. So you've probably seen this slide a couple times today. These are the sponsors that made sure that we could get here. So I'm Adam Driscoll. I am a Microsoft MVP. I have been for the last decade, originally in PowerShell and then in Cloud and Data Center. I'm the founder of Iron Man Software. I make stuff like PowerShell tools for Visual Studio, PowerShell Pro tools, PowerShell Universal. I also have written a couple books. I'm a YouTuber. I write a lot of blog posts, have a lot of GitHub projects, that kind of thing. And outside of that, currently a cyclist and outdoor enthusiast. Like many people, I had a very hard time getting here. It took me a total of 53 hours to get here. We started in Haley, Idaho, and we went through Boise, Los Angeles, London, and then finally Vienna. So by the time I got here, I hadn't slept for about 2 days. Yeah, but I made it. All right, and remember that 53 hours. It'll be important at the end of this talk. So what is PowerShell Universal? So this is what we're going to be talking about today, primarily. And this is kind of how it stood V2, and some of these things are now new in our V3 version. Primarily, there are three feature groups, which are APIs, automation, and user interfaces. APIs are for creating REST APIs, similar to things like Polaris or Pod. You can create REST APIs and execute PowerShell scripts. Then we have automation features, such as running and scheduling scripts. You can have events fire off when certain things happen inside PowerShell Universal. In-browser terminals, so you can do ad hoc scripts. And it has really tight integration with the PowerShell host, so you can get things like pipeline output and error handling and progress bars and all that kind of stuff. Kind of where PowerShell Universal started was with user interfaces. Originally, it was PowerShell Universal Dashboard, and that was kind of built for building highly interactive user interfaces using PowerShell scripts. That is now a component of PowerShell Universal. You can still do that. We're going to kind of get into that a little bit today, but mostly I have a Universal Dashboard presentation tomorrow that's going to go into kind of some more involved interfaces we can create. The entire platform allows you to have different interface or environments. So you can have multiple PowerShell versions running with the same server. You can set variables and different modules, and we handle secrets using the Microsoft Secret Management module, which allows you to store things like credentials. The entire platform is built on a code-first configuration concept. So the idea being that everything is stored as a PowerShell script and configured via a PowerShell script. You can use the UI, or you can use the PowerShell scripts directly. And then you can check those into GitHub and push out the changes to a CI pipeline to your different PowerShell Universal servers. The entire thing has a security layer over it, so we have lots of different security providers like OpenID Connect, SAML2, Forms authentication, Windows authentication, and then role-based access controls. And then new to this version is SQL persistence. We always had a single file database that stored things like job runs, output from those jobs like pipeline output, auth tokens, and users. But now we have it in a SQL server, so you can kind of distribute your PowerShell Universal instances. Primarily, I think the thing that has made PowerShell Universal the most successful is the community. Even when we were PowerShell Universal Dashboard back in 2017, it really took off, and a lot of people were building really cool things with that, and lots of extensibility happened, new components were coming in, and that still kind of lives on to this day. We have a very robust forum that's very active, so lots and lots of people playing with PowerShell Universal. So that's kind of PowerShell Universal, but what we're going to be talking about today is PowerShell Universal Desktop. So with our V3 version, we added a bunch of new desktop features. So the idea with the desktop version is you don't run it as a server, you don't run it as a service, you run it as a desktop application, and then you get some additional features that I'll be talking about today, like file associations, hotkeys, protocol handlers, and system events. It runs as your current user context, and then you can, double-click a file, and it will launch a script inside PowerShell Universal, and you can do whatever you want with that. All right. Demo time. If I could get out of PowerPoint. All right, so I am running PowerShell Universal Desktop right here. It is just a little desktop application, and it actually is running kind of the the same code that the server version runs, but it's in a Windows Forms app actually, and it's using WebView 2, which is a component Microsoft just created, and it actually uses the Edge web browser to display stuff. So that's what's in there. It's similar to an Electron app, and that's what VS Code is, for example. So on the left-hand side, you'll see things like APIs, automation, desktop features, user interface features, which we'll look at a couple of those. We have some like platform-specific things like variables, modules, published folders, and general settings. So I'm actually just going to kind of jump into some of this and start configuring some stuff for my desktop. So first of all, I want to make sure that I stay on time. So what I'm going to do is I have a bunch of scripts that I'm just going to copy and paste so you don't have to watch me type. But I have this, which I'll put it into PowerShell Universal to make it a little bit easier to see. I am going to create a script to notify me of how much time left I have. Click OK there to create my script. And we'll make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So this is just a script that's getting my end time, which is 5:30 p.m., current date, and then subtracting the 2, and then it's just using burnt toast to pop up a notification. So the idea being here is that since this is running as a desktop app, if I just run this, I should, oh, I'm silenced. I have 22 minutes left. We'll turn off Do Not Disturb since I use burnt toast a bunch. Let's try that again. So burnt toast is just an application or a module that allows you to configure the Windows toast notifications. You can get that on the gallery. And there's like tons of options you can do for burnt toast. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a schedule and set it to time left. And let's create a simple schedule that fires every 5 minutes. So now every 5 minutes I should get a burnt toast notification. So that's just kind of scheduled in this application. Like if I were to log off my session, it wouldn't happen because this is running as my current user context, not as a service. So now that that's set up and I don't go over, let's start to look at some of the desktop features. So we have file associations, hotkeys, protocol handlers, and system events. The first thing I want to do is set up a file association. So file associations being, something you double click on a file and something happens. And file associations are set up in the registry. Pretty much what it does is it looks at the file extension and then there's an associated path to whatever application you want to run. So what we did in PowerShell Universal Desktop was just make it easier to assign a PowerShell script to a particular type of file. So what I'm actually going to do is a couple steps here. I have a mountain bike ride that I did last week. And if you've ever seen, or if you ever used like Strava or Map My Ride or anything like that, a really standard format is GPX. And GPX files, pretty much all they do is like every, 5 seconds, or I don't even know how frequently it takes a point. But that's what each one of these nodes are. These TRK PT points are just latitude and longitude, and that's how it like does your whole like ride. So this is a ride I did, and you can see it just has like a whole bunch of those points. So what I'm going to do is I want to actually associate GPX files with PowerShell Universal and display a map of my ride. So I have a dashboard that I've created, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means as we look at this in PowerShell Universal. So I'll go to User Interfaces, Dashboards, create a new dashboard. I'm just going to call this one Map. And it's going to create a blank dashboard. So what dashboards are user interfaces that you can author with PowerShell. If I actually go to the details of this, you'll see that there's just a little PowerShell script in here. Like it's pretty much blank. It doesn't do anything. But if I click this View button, you'll see it pops up, and we have this UI, and this little text here, PowerShell Universal, that's what's displaying in the title bar right there. But if I were to actually take this code, which I'll explain in a little bit. Oh, I've got 19 minutes left. I better hurry up. All right, I am going to create a map inside my dashboard. So there's a two-step process. We're going to associate a script with my file association, and then we're going to cache the file name that I open. From there, we're going to load up the file into an XML document, which was that XML document I showed you guys with the GPX file. From there, we're going to use this line of code to actually kind of convert it into a way that we can use with new UD map. Pretty much what it does is it takes the longitude and latitude of all those points that we saw inside our XML file, and then I'm going to draw a line on the map using new UD vector layer. So these are kind of like standard mapping control terminology. If you don't know what a raster layer is or a vector layer, it's just kind of like things that Leaflet uses, which is the JavaScript library that we're going to be looking at. So that's step one. Step two, we're going to create a script that we're actually going to execute with our file association. So I'm just going to call this file association. Okie dokie. And I'm going to grab that from here so we don't have to type it. All right. And this is going to be a real simple script. All it's going to do is accept a file parameter. It's going to set that file parameter into the cache, and then it's going to show a page. So pretty much when you associate things with the desktop features of PowerShell Universal, you're going to get like certain information about what happened. In this case, with file associations, you're going to get a file parameter that contains the file path that was double-clicked. And one thing that I was doing as I was building this demo was realizing that there was no way to really transfer this data to a page, so that's why I'm doing this cache thing. It's a little like weird hack that I did. And then we're going to display the page. Finally, we need to set up the file association, and I can say .gpx. I'm going to associate that with my script. And we're not going to fill out the file parameter because that's going to be passed in automatically. So now that I have that defined, I should be able to just come over to here and double-click my GPX file. And if this works, you can see that it popped up my dashboard now. So that black line is the actual mountain bike ride that I did, and it's kind of overlaid on the raster layer, which is the tile server that displays the map. So there's actually this thing called open maps, and you pretty much tell it like where you are and like what zoom level you're at, and that's how it draws the tiles. It's pretty much how Google Maps works and Bing Maps and that kind of thing. So I just got that GPX file, I converted it from XML into an array of points, and then I drew them on my map. So now that the GPX files are just associated with more or less PowerShell Universal, which is then associating that script with that GPX file. And we're reading it, and we can open it, parses it, displays the map. So similarly, with other like desktop features, you can do that with like hotkeys. So a hotkey is a global like keyword shortcut that you can put anywhere on your machine. This is not like a super new concept, but like you can register hotkeys in PowerShell if you had a PowerShell window open, and then execute some PowerShell script with that. Just make it a little bit easier to do something like that. Similarly, we're going to create a script for hotkeys. Hotkey. And what I'm actually going to do is make it so that I can like launch different processes on my machine without having to like, you know, open up command prompt or like open up the run dialog. I just want to hit like Alt F1 and open up Notepad. So I have a little script that is very simple. All it does is accept a file path, and then we're going to call start process on that file path that you pass in. So I'm going to go over to hotkey, and we're going to assign a couple hotkeys. So I am going to use, I think, F1, if it can find it, F1, and we'll do Alt, and I'll use hotkey. And you can see the parameter automatically pops up because it's parsing the script block, or the param block, and finding that parameter. And we're going to assign Notepad to that. So now that that's been defined, I should be able to press Alt F1, and now like it just pops up notepads. Boop, boop, boop. And I could do the same thing if I wanted to, like F1, oh, 14 minutes left. Alt. And then we can select hotkey again, and I can do the same thing with like calc. Oh no! Oh, it's because I did the same hotkey number. I don't even know what'll happen if I do this. Oh, it's still Notepad. All right, gotta fix that one. All right. All right, so that's kind of hotkeys. It's pretty straightforward. You know, you're assigning a hotkey to a script. You can pass in parameters if you want to. You will get some information about what hotkey was pressed, so you could make decisions based on the hotkeys that are being pressed and that kind of thing. Now let's look at protocol handlers. So this one is a little like, it's not super clear, I think. A lot of people don't realize that this is typically happening, but protocol handlers are actually used by a lot of things on Windows. Zoom does it, WebEx does it, VS Code does it. It's pretty much when you click a link inside a web browser, if you have a custom protocol handler defined, it is going to talk to the local system and launch a process based on whatever that protocol is. So I think the VS Code protocol is VS Code : / and then some URL. So we can actually define our own protocols in here. And this is, again, just like a registry thing. Like you could go into the registry and assign a protocol URL to a process. And when you click it, what you're going to receive inside your process, like the arguments of your process, is the actual URL that was clicked. So, similarly, I have an example of what I'm going to do here, just so we can see some output. I am going to create a script. We'll call it protocol, okie dokie. And now, once we register the protocol, what we're going to receive is a protocol URI, which is going to be the URI that was clicked inside the browser, or you can even open these from like the command line if you like used start process and did the protocol. It's just going to find the registered protocol handler for this. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kind of like parse this URI. This is my real sloppy way of parsing it. You could also use something like the URI class in PowerShell to actually just get the path part. So what you can imagine is you're going to have a URI something like this, and what I'm looking for is this part where it says like calc. Because one question I get a lot from people that are like building things with PowerShell Universal is like, how do I launch a local application from a website? And typically, websites don't want you to do that because then we'd have all kinds of viruses. But in this way, you could potentially accomplish that as long as you did some, I guess, some data cleaning in here to make sure that it is not abused. So we're looking for that, just that like tail end piece there of the calc. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is actually go to my protocol handler, create a new protocol handler. We're just going to call it PSConFEU, and I will call that protocol script. So I'm going to click OK there. And now that that is defined, we've actually set something in the registry that says like protocol scripts with the that start with a PSU schema is what they call it, should be launched with PowerShell Universal. So I've actually created this index.html file that has a couple icons in it. They're actually links. You can see my mouse cursor changing. And I'm actually going to show you what that looks like in the source. Actually, I'm just going to open in VS Code. It'll be easier. All right. So if you look in here, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the protocol URL. Like typically, the anchor tags, the ahref tags, will have like an HTTPS or HTTP link that will take you to another website, and that's just the HTTP protocol. But with the custom protocol handlers, you can actually have something like this, where it's a PSU link. And if you're using Zoom, it's a Zoom protocol or VS Code protocol. And then what that looks like is it's just a standard link inside the web browser, and when you click it, it's actually, you've probably seen this prompt before, like and VS Code wants to open up, but you can see here that PowerShell Universal Desktop wants to open up. So once I click open on that, it's going to actually launch that application. So what it did is it has that application registered, PowerShell Universal Desktop registered as the protocol handler. It starts that, passes in the URI, which then is passed into the script, which then I've decided to like launch applications based on that protocol URI. Oh, 9 minutes left. So yeah, it opened in Notepad, it's just that it was collapsed. Let's see if we can open Paint. Yeah. All right. So that's kind of the idea with protocol handlers. They are typically for things like this. You could also launch them from the command line. So if I were to copy this link and actually go to my terminal, it's pretty much anywhere on the machine. If I did start process, MS Paint, it's going to do the same thing. So it's just like a system-wide protocol handler for the PSU protocol. All right. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about system events. So system events are actually WMI persistent events. So the idea with that is you actually register with WMI, and this is actually using the register event commandlet. And when you do that, what happens is you can pass in a WMI query, and when certain things happen on the system, it will trigger your PowerShell script. So it's actually part of PowerShell. We've just kind of integrated it into this desktop application. And what we're going to first do is create a new script, and this is going to be my system event script. And I am going to come back to, oops, I should just open this in that directory. We'll look at what this looks like. I'm going to do a burnt toast notification. Get real annoying. And you can see here I'm accepting a target instance parameter. That is what you get inside your WMI persistent events. If you were to do something inside of just standard PowerShell, if you did register event, I think it's like new event data or something like that is the name of the variable, but we're passing in target instance just because that's the nomenclature of WMI. And I'm just going to do a burnt toast notification and pass that target instance into the text. So target instance is actually an object, and it has a bunch of properties. What we're going to do is hook it up to a Win32 process, which does include things like the process ID, name, path, and all that kind of stuff. And by passing it in as a string, it's just going to call toString on it and display some information about that. So we'll save that. And then inside my system events, we're just going to call this PWSH. And there are 3 different types of event types with WMI persistent events. There's create, delete, and modify. And kind of the way this works is it actually like polls WMI, and you can set the polling interview and everything if you use register event directly. I think we're polling every second or 2. And it's looking for particular event types. So we're going to look for a create event of Win32 process. I save this WMI query because it's the syntax is a little weird, but it kind of reads like English. It's not too bad. And we're just going to put that in the condition. So I'm actually going to plop that in VS Code so we can see it a little bit better. So this is saying target instance is a Win32 process, and target instance.name is PWSH. So anytime I open a PWSH.exe, it's going to trigger this system event. So you can do lots of things like this. I'm just targeting Win32 process. You can do services when they're created. I mean, I think you could go as crazy as when files are created or modified. Obviously, it's probably going to cause some performance problems on your system. But then we will call system event, and we're not going to pass in target instance. They'll get passed in automatically. Okay, so now that's been created, let's see if this works. If I open PowerShell, now you can see that I'm getting a burnt toast notification because effectively I registered that system event, and anytime I open up PowerShell, it is going to do a new notification in there. Eventually it'll probably just silence it. For a while there, I actually had this just running on my box, and it was like really weird. It's like, why did that PowerShell process start? Why did that PowerShell process start? All right. So that is kind of like how you can set up these little desktop automations inside your PowerShell Universal instance. And now I want to talk a little bit about like what happened behind the scenes when I was doing that. So there's 2 places that I'll show you where this happens. Is if we go to this configurations view, you can see that we kind of clicked through all this stuff, and it started generating these files. So the PowerShell Universal system will take the things that I'm clicking on in the UI and start generating PowerShell scripts in the background. So we have dashboards. These are metadata about the dashboard, our file associations, hotkeys, my license, protocol handlers. 4 minutes left. And all of this is kind of the configuration data for PowerShell Universal. So what's cool about that is that you can then check it into source control or share it. We even have a concept of templates where you can output it as like a zip file more or less and import it in there, so then you can have all these configurations available that you can kind of import into your PowerShell Universal instance. Yeah, so that is kind of the concept there. And I don't think, let's get back here. So I went 5 minutes short, but what I want you guys to do is, if you want, you can go to ironmansoftware.com/PSConfEU, and if you can remember how many hours it took me to get here, you can type that in and get a free license to PowerShell Universal. So, yeah, but I'm going to open up to questions. Yeah.
You generated several scripts for different actions in the dashboard. I saw also there's an option for tagging.
Mm-hmm.
The point is, because every time you do an action, you get a whole list of scripts which you can choose from. Wouldn't it be more user-friendly, I'd like to say, if I just see on which purpose, for example, tag, the script I created, and have the option to expand all of them, for example.
Yeah, definitely. I can see what you're saying. Like, for example, so the question was, would it be easier if we could like tag the scripts, and then when you were selecting scripts for things like file associations, for example, instead of just having a big list of scripts, you would have like a tag that you could select from. Like, I just want scripts that are like related to file associations or something like that. And yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Because yeah, I think right now this dropdown is not great, because it's like the same dropdown for everything, and some people have a lot of scripts, and you'll see the folders, because you can actually do folders inside the scripts view, but it doesn't let you really drill down right now, so yeah. Yeah?
I think the PowerShell Universal Desktop GUI is just a configuration GUI, because it still works everything you configure.
Say again? So it's just configuration GUI?
When you close the window, everything is still working what you configure?
Yeah, so if you close this window, you'll see that the application is actually still running. So it's just a desktop application. You'd actually have to like exit it here for then it to stop working, sort of thing. So yeah, so PowerShell Universal Desktop just runs in the user context. When you log in, it automatically starts. And if you log out, it will stop. But PowerShell Universal, like the server one, if you install it with the MSI, it's going to install as a service, and then even if you log out, things are going to still happen. So, and even though everyone got a free license, like all the stuff I showed today didn't require a license, so you can just like play with it too. Because yeah, all our desktop stuff is just available for free. Yeah.
We saw already that you are not able to use a hotkey twice, for sure. But what about system hotkeys, for example? Control A or Control C or something like that?
That's a good question. I think the system hotkey will actually win out. We can try it. Let's see what happens if I do. Let's see, A. Oh, that's annoying. A. Control A, hotkey, I don't know. Will we start MS Paint? Yeah. So this is something we need to look at. We should have a little more user-friendly thing. Or if you like select it, it should like say something, but it knows. Windows is like, all right, can't do that.
Is PowerShell Universal Desktop designed to create local applications, and can you package the executable and pass it to another computer and run it on the other one?
Not right now, but like last time I gave a presentation similar to this, that was like one of the first questions I got was like, oh, it'd be really cool if I could just package this, like provide it to my users. Like they don't need to see the admin console, right? Some of the things that we were looking at were like shortcuts and stuff. We used to have this thing called PS Commander that did a lot of that. And you could, create a shortcut, set up some hotkeys, create a couple of user interfaces inside the dashboard, and then provide it to your users. And then, and then distribute it. So thinking about that, how to do that. Right now, I think the Universal Dashboard stack is kind of heavy. It has all these React components and stuff. It would be like 100 megs just for the runtime, and then whatever you add to it. So.
Since you're using actions for your virtual the application itself is not cross-platform at this point.
It's not cross-platform at this point. Yeah. It depends on want. I definitely have had some people ask for Mac support and stuff like that, but pretty much all the features that are in here for specifically for desktop are Windows specific at the moment. Things like protocol handlers and hotkeys and file associations, I think you could do in Mac or Linux. But yeah, it's something that we've thought about. And there's nothing stopping us from WebView 2 is just kind of rendering this. Really, the hard parts are already done. It's just hosting it somehow in a window. So it's possible that we could make it cross-platform if there was a desire for people to have it cross-platform. Yeah.
It's often user-based because when I use this PC and I don't think my shortcuts and so on, it's fine. Another one will use this. I don't like to follow up to the all, so you have to tell us. But is it user-based or is this computer-based?
Everything is user-based. So yeah, the question was whether or not this is affects all the computers, but or all the users on a computer. But everything is user-based. I think it would be possible to set it computer-based, but since it doesn't have admin access, it wouldn't be able to do that anyways. This is running as an unelevated process, so it's just affecting the H key current user key pretty much when it's registering these things. So.
Wait a second. You defined protocol handlers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That's done in the local machine on the top protocol handler.
Yeah, here, I'll show you.
For lower, that's CD.
Yeah.
You could,
Oh wait, current. Oh, classes root.
and now and then you find the protocol.
Right, and I think it must be mounting. Yeah, because it doesn't have admin access, so it must be mounting. Because when you switch current user, for example, this current user hive doesn't exist technically. It's just I don't know. It's mounting one of the other hives, and I don't exactly remember where that is. But as you log in, it sets an alias of current user to that. So I have to imagine it must. H key. Oh yeah, right. So I wonder. Yeah, I don't know. If we were to look at. So see how H key users, and then we have the SID of the user, and then the classes, and that must be what's happening. Is it's mounting that as the. Yeah. So it shouldn't affect any other users.
So when you created the PowerShell Universal Desktop, which audience did you target? Which audience did you have in mind when you created this tool? Is this tool made for administrators who want to create GUIs?
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of where I was. It was kind of I'm making this for me. Yeah. And then when I released it, I started immediately getting questions oh, I want to distribute this to my users, kind of thing. So, yeah, kind of where I started thinking about there was then you would use, the desktop as a tool for developing things, and then having something else distributed, sort of thing, that you could distribute to your users. So then it becomes a development tool rather than with the server. Sometimes it feels the server is. I know they always talk about this, treating your servers like cattle rather than, what was the other cattle verse? Cats. Pets, yes, right. And I think sometimes PowerShell Universal servers seem like pets more than cattle, even though technically you can push it out in a CI/CD pipeline sort of thing. But I would think that it'd be nicer to have PowerShell Universal Desktop be the tool that then produces, the cattle or whatever. They could distribute, and it wouldn't matter because they're really reproducible sort of thing. So, yeah.
It would be more useful if you can package the run on that.
Right, exactly. And that's where, I don't know, like one of the problems is like the whole licensing requirement. Like you want to use some components of this that require a license and kind of thing. Is like, as a desktop application, I don't want to have to worry about that. So that's another thing I'm trying to figure out is like, how do we just remove that, make it a development tool, and then you can distribute it freely, sort of thing. So, yeah. But it's just like, right now, we're kind of in that phase where it was a server tool, and now we have this cool desktop thing, and it's like, is this even useful to people? So, yeah, that's kind of what I want to show off. Because I think it's cool. You guys think it's kind of cool? Or? Yeah, okay. Cool. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, what happens if you actually just close the PSU desktop and try to run those handlers without it being active?
That's a good question. I know, well, I can tell you this. File associations and protocol handlers will still do something. Hotkeys and system events will not. The thing is like right now, these will open PowerShell Universal since they're registered with the registry. It'll actually start it, it'll pass something to the command line, and typically what it does is it will connect to the actual running instance of PowerShell Universal Desktop, but since it was closed, it won't open a new instance, which maybe should be something we should do, right? But it will launch that, and then it won't be able to connect to that actual process, and yeah, so nothing will happen. I can try it if you want. Live demo. Yeah. Do I still have this open? Yeah, it's still going to prompt it because it's still registered with the registry. It still launched it in the background. I bet if we opened it, you would have seen something happen, but nothing actually happens. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Is the scheduler registered in the normal Windows scheduler for PowerShell scripts like the...
It is not. We actually use this thing called Hangfire. It's actually, it's more or less a custom scheduler inside PowerShell. Ooh, oh yeah. Oh, I can't open, well, can I open that in here? One sec, I'll see if I can do this. Job details. Yeah. So we have this thing called Hangfire. It's actually an open source project. It allows you to like schedule jobs and all that kind of thing. And you can actually like see the recurring jobs and all that stuff. So it's actually using that library to do the scheduling. And yeah, that's kind of how that works. What's kind of cool about it is it actually works with SQL. So if you have multiple like PowerShell Universal instances talking to each other, and one goes down, for example, or you know they're communicating to that central SQL server and doing that kind of stuff. So. Anybody else? Cool. Well, oh, here's my cool magic card thing. But yeah, go to PSConfEU. If you can remember how many hours it took me to drive here or get here, enter your email address. It'll just download a license. And it's just putting your email address in the license. So it's not even registering you to anything. So yeah. If there's no other questions, thanks for coming to my talk. And I have another talk on Universal Dashboard tomorrow if you're interested.